In 1843, Karl Marx wrote an essay called On the Jewish Question. He was responding to German thinkers who claimed that Jews could only be free if they gave up their religious and spiritual identity. Marx, of course, disagreed. Even in a secular state, he said, religion does not just disappear. In fact, the secular state assumes or presumes religion will always be there. Fast forward 150 years later, Professor Anne Norton, a political scientist, deliberately echoed Marx with her own book called On the Muslim Question. For Marx, the Jewish question defined Enlightenment debates. For Norton, today, it's the Muslim question. Back then, the Jewish question was about ending laws that kept Jews as second-class citizens. Professor Norton reminds us that was about equality and recognition. And today, Norton argues Muslims are in the same place. She writes, the freedom of Jews to vote, to participate in politics as equals, and to walk through the cities as equals, accompanied the expansion of democracy and marked the achievement of liberal constitutions. The figure of the Muslim has become the axis where questions of political philosophy and political theology, politics and ethics meet. Islam is marked as the preeminent danger to politics, to Christians, Jews, and secular humanists, to women, sex and sexuality, to the values and institutions of the Enlightenment. Her point is very sharp. Muslims have become the screen onto which we, in the Western societies, project our deepest anxieties, insecurities, and contradictions. It is about blaming others for the problems we ourselves create instead of looking into the mirror. Questions about women's rights, free speech, secularism, even sexuality, somehow all of it gets tied back to Islam. And she rejects the whole clash of civilizations idea and says the real problem isn't Islam, it's our own double standards and intolerance. Take the headscarf debate, for example. Nuns and women in other traditions, when they wear their traditional clothing, don't raise eyebrows. But when a Muslim woman wears a hijab, suddenly it's a threat to democracy and freedom of speech. Why is modesty only oppressive when it's Muslim? Or free speech, for example. When Muslims protest offensive images against the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they are told they hate freedom. Yet in France and other countries, when comedians, for example, want to do a comedy sketch to mock the government or the president, they are banned because it goes against social cohesion. So one rule for some, another for Muslims. That's why Professor Norton frames the Muslim question a mirror. These debates reveal more about our own contradictions and insecurities than about Islam itself. And Muslims live in that paradox every single day. Ordinary lives, working, raising families, contributing, are overshadowed by suspicion. A beard, a hijab, even an Arabic phrase can suddenly make someone the other. Norton is very blunt. She calls out lazy, dishonest arguments that fuel Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred. But she also points to something very hopeful. Multicultural societies already exist and they will continue to exist. The only way forward is coexistence. And that brings us to Britain today. Recently, we saw huge marches in London with people chanting they wanted to get their country back. Now, let's be fair. Some or many who marched are genuinely concerned and worried about the state of this country. Everyone's struggling with bills, jobs, housing. The frustration among many is real. However, the march didn't stop there. It turned into something else, something openly Islamophobic and anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. We heard speakers talking about religious war, calling for religious war. We heard rhetoric designed to provoke fear and even violence. That's not loving your country. That's not defending your country. That's division and hatred. And we have to ask, who benefits? Who funds these organizations and organizers? The speakers, the platforms, because ordinary working people aren't the ones pulling those strings. And here's the truth. Muslims aren't the problem. Immigrants aren't the real problem. The real problem is power and wealth being hoarded at the top. Look at the numbers. Tax avoidance, for example, costs over 100 billion a year, about £3,000 per taxpayer. We saw back in 2008, the bankers and the elite, the taxpayers had to bail them out. Asylum seekers, they contribute more than take out from the economy. And the list continues, and the list is long. Yet the far right and some in the media and some politicians fixate on asylum seekers while ignoring the billions literally stolen by corporations and the super rich. It is also not about the right or the left. It's about the bottom and the top. And the reality is, without immigration, the NHS, for example, would collapse. The cost of living crisis isn't caused by minorities. It's driven by corporate greed and political choices. Poverty, austerity is a political choice. Yet billionaires and corporate leaders from abroad are telling ordinary Brits to prepare to fight, that a war is coming and they have to prepare to fight. Isn't this inciting hatred? Isn't this inciting violence? Why should ordinary Brits take direction from billionaires who will never feel the impact of austerity, impact of this crisis? But here's the good news. People are starting to see through the lies. Across communities, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Sikhs, secular, black, white, Asian, people are joining the dots. They see the real problem isn't their neighbor. It's the elite who profit from division and hate and push policies that enrich themselves only while everyone else is struggling. Look at Brexit, for example. We were told it would fix everything. All of the problems will go away after Brexit. But today, costs are higher. The economy is weaker. And yet migrants are still blamed. The truth is, without immigrants, the country would be in a deeper hole. So when we hear calls to unite the kingdom, we should ask, unite against who? Because if unity means scapegoating Muslims, immigrants, or minorities, this isn't unity. It's all hatred and division. Professor Ann Norton shows us the Muslim question is really about us confronting ourselves, our own insecurities, our own contradictions, our inequalities, our refusal to face who really holds the power, who is really pushing this agenda. The answer isn't exclusion. It isn't scapegoating. The answer is coalition, recognition, and building a society that includes all of us and works for all of us.